Oh hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 90s Rom-Com Deep Dive with me. Today we're talking about Pretty Woman, one of the most iconic rom-coms of all time if I say so myself. Julia Roberts and Richard Gere deliver peak romantic chemistry in this film. It has all the glamour, charm, and over-the-top romance that definitely defines the era. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I have seen Pretty Woman before. I know. I'm supposed to be watching these for the first time. All the other 90s rom-coms I haven't seen, but I did watch Pretty Woman for the first time last year. So, still pretty fresh. So yeah, I did watch it last year. I watched it last year twice because I really liked it. But I did watch it again just yesterday to obviously take my notes and get my ratings right. And I just love the movie, so why not watch it a third time? So let's get into the scene by scene breakdown. We start with Edward, who is a wealthy businessman, and it's very obvious he's just too busy for a real relationship. He gets some intel from his past exes, basically saying that they all talk to his secretary more than they ever talk to him, which, you know, when you're about your money, you're about your shmoney. But that's our first indicator that this man is all business and no heart. Meanwhile, the film introduces us to Hollywood Boulevard. You know, they're showing drug dealers, they're showing prostitutes, and of course, the Walk of Fame. Vivian, played by Julia Roberts, then steps onto the screen in her now iconic outfit, that blue cutout dress, thigh-high boots, cheap blonde wig, paperboy hat, that red blazer that weirdly enough gives me Hugh Hefner vibes. Her makeup is harsh, you know, she's doing the whole prostitute look, but she still looks gorgeous, honestly. From the jump, she's obviously street smart, very witty, and ultimately unfiltered. Her roommate and best friend Kit is already blowing their rent money on drugs, setting up their dynamic as Vivian being the responsible one and Kit kind of just not being new to this life, but true to this life. The film subtly hints at the fact that there's danger in their line of work because Vivian tells Kit, you know, a girl was found in the dumpster. And obviously, if you're an adult, you know that sex work is very dangerous inherently, but she's kind of just explaining why she wants to get out of this lifestyle and that she kind of started it because desperate times called for desperate measures. But it's kind of a more serious reality check that the movie pretty much avoids for the rest of the film, which, I mean, it's a rom-com, so it's not supposed to be about serious topics, but I am glad they did mention that at least. So basically, Edward is driving around and he's lost because he's not from there, he's just there for work, and he ends up on Hollywood Boulevard. So he then pulls over and asks Vivian for directions. She hops in his car and he even allows her to take control and drive because she has more experience driving stick than he does, I guess. Well, I don't know if it's just stick shift or it's some like special. She was saying something about the car, 4-cylinder. None of that makes sense to me, but basically she's better at driving it than him. He asks her, you know, what's your rate, how much? And she's like, I can't take less than 100. And he's like, 100 a day? And she's like, 100 for the hour. And he's like, 100 an hour is pretty stiff. And she like reaches over and she's like, no, but it's got potential. She's quick, she's funny, and she doesn't waste her time. Eventually, Edward offers her $300 for the whole night and she accepts. All of this money talk, I was like, that is not nearly enough money for the whole night, but you know, oh, the economy, oh, inflation. So Edward gives Vivian his trench coat to put on since they're going into his very luxurious hotel. And I just find it so funny that she's like, why? Why do I need to put on? Obviously, she does not exist in these bougie spaces normally, so she's not used to it, but it's so funny. She puts it on, but it's wide open. Like, girl, wrap up. up? All the hotel guests are, of course, staring at her because, you know, it's obvious that she's not usually supposed to be there. But I also find it funny that all the men are just like gobsmacked over her. And you know what? I really don't think it's because she's a prostitute. It's because she's drop dead gorgeous. Even after her transformation, men are still breaking their necks to look at her. So she's really just that girl. It's also just like so insane that everyone's like, how could she be wearing that? Because like, I don't know if it was really that different in the 90s, but like girls wear that out clubbing and they came home at night. Like how do you not know that she didn't just come from the club? Like why do you automatically assume that she's, well, she is a sex worker, but come on you guys. There's a later scene where Vivian's helping Edward tie his tie, and when he asks her, how'd you learn how to tie a tie so well? She deadpans and says, I screwed the whole debate team. And of course she's joking and says, I had a grandpa. Like I learned from him obviously, but it's the way that he like totally would have believed her if she didn't say that she wasn't joking. Vivian's Rodeo Drive scene is totally legendary. She walks into one of those bougie stores. I don't know if it was Louis Vuitton or some other store, but she's on Rodeo Drive, so it's definitely gonna be bougie. And she walks in and the saleswomen are immediately judging her like, what are you doing in here? You don't belong here. I'm not gonna service you. Like, she's like, how much is in? She's like, it's not your size. Like, that wasn't the question. What? They essentially refuse to serve Vivian. And it's a great example of class prejudice, which plays a lot of factors in this film. Edward later takes her on a shopping spree back to Rodeo Drive, and she comes back with all her nice bags in hand. She's like, y'all work on commission, right? Big mistake. Huge. And that is just such a satisfying moment, because she's a paying customer at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what she does for work. That's her personal business. Like, she's a paying customer and they missed out. Next, Edward takes Vivian to the opera where they see La Traviata, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which essentially mirrors the story of Pretty Woman, except the opera has a very tragic ending, but I mean, most operas have very tragic endings, so that's what's up. When they get to the opera, Vivian asks Edward like, how am I gonna understand what they're saying when it's not in English? And he's basically tells her like, you'll feel it. Sure enough, she's moved to tears by the end of the opera. They go back to the hotel and they have this intimate moment where she finally kisses him on the lips, which is obviously breaking her own rule of her saying, I do everything except kiss on the lips because it's too intimate. But you know, they've essentially spent a week together at this point and she's falling in love. Aww. It's a subtle but huge moment. Things start to fall apart when Edward's business partner, Philip, finds out that Vivian is a prostitute. He basically treats her as such and is very dehumanizing to her, and even assaults her by smacking her across the face, which is crazy. Edward steps in just as things get violent, but the damage is already done. Vivian sees that despite the fantasy, she's still just a transaction to these men and they're never not gonna see her that way. So she decides to leave, telling Edward that she wants the whole fairy tale or nothing at all. Edward realizes, you know, in this moment that she's slipping from his fingers, he realizes, no, I have to go after her. So he finally races over to Vivian's apartment right before she leaves for San Francisco. He conquers his fear of heights by climbing the stairs up to her floor because she lives on the top floor, of course. You know, roses in the mouth, climbing up the ladder. It's just a really heartwarming scene. And it's a classic rom-com ending, complete with swelling opera music. And then we hear the same voice from the beginning of the movie saying, welcome to Hollywood, what's your dream? And it's cheesy, but it's a really nice tie back to the beginning because you could say that Vivian got her dream, you know? All right, now that we've broken down the movie, let's get into ratings. For those of you that are new here, I use a simple rating system for all these rom-coms. It's across 5 categories. So the first one is chemistry, and that's basically just how well do the romantic leads connect. The second category is plot strength. Is the story engaging and is it well paced? Third is laugh factor. Does the humor land and how funny is it overall? Fourth is timelessness. Does the movie hold up today, or does it feel stuck in its era? And lastly is fashion. Are the outfits iconic and memorable or not? Each category gets a score out of 5, which is a total of 25 points. All right, for chemistry, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5. Honestly, Julia Roberts and Richard Gere have effortless chemistry. Their connection builds naturally, and every moment between them feels charged. For plot, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. It's simple but effective. It's the rom-com blueprint, and they just got it right. The romance feels earned, which is really satisfying to see as well. For laughs, I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 5. Honestly, this movie had some really great humor, and Vivian's one-liners are just so good. They're so good, and I don't know if it was the wine, but I was giggling up a storm watching this last night. For timelessness, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Some elements feel very 90s, and the concept itself is very much a fantasy, but that just totally adds to the charm. And of course, that's the rom-com trope. That's the reason we watch rom-coms, to have that feel-good aspect, so I really enjoyed it. For fashion, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. The outfits are pretty iconic. You know, when she has her transformation, it's such a Cinderella moment, and we love to see it. That gives us a total score of 21.5 out of 25. All right, before we wrap up, I wanna talk about the movie Anora, because I watched Anora the day before I watched Pretty Woman, and I didn't expect them to have so many similarities, but I just gotta say a few things. So what stood out to me about Anora in relation to Pretty Woman is kind of the themes that it explores. Obviously, class divides, transactional relationships, and the idea of personal agency as a whole. It definitely explores these themes in a much more gritty and modern way, which I really appreciated. Pretty Woman romanticizes the premise, but Anora leans into the realism of it and making the protagonist's struggles feel raw and immediate. Anora explores the raw and painful side of this world, showing how men see women like Anora as disposable. While Pretty Woman is the dream, Anora is the gut-wrenching reality. Also, both movies were shot on 35mm, which I know was very common for 90s movies, but for them to utilize that now was just really beautiful. The whole film was super stunning. The deep colors, the subtle grain, the striking contrast, it's just a visual treat, if I may say so myself. The ending scene pretty much broke me. The silence, the snow covering the car, the way that Igor truly sees Annie, and she kind of feels that for the first time of, you know, being understood and cared for and not being disrespected and seen as more than just a piece of meat. It really hit me hard, and it's the kind of emotional punch you don't get in mainstream Hollywood a lot these days. One of the things I found most compelling was how Anora plays with the idea of silent solidarity. The people who initially seem like they're Annie's enemies, such as the bodyguards, the handlers, and even the thugs, they're all really just people that are trying to get by, which is kind of just like her. There's this unspoken class allegiance that forms throughout the film, something that Pretty Woman touches on but doesn't really fully explore. And then there's the ending, which hit me like a punch to the gut. Unlike Pretty Woman, which gives us the dream and the fantasy, Anora reminds us that reality doesn't always bend to our desires. Yet, even in its heartbreak, there's still a trace of hope. The balance of joy and sadness, comedy and tragedy makes Anora one of the most human films I've seen in a long time. Also, the ending, not just the snow covering the car, that everything is just so much more beautiful on 35mm, but the snow covering the car, but also the ending, the fact that Annie started sobbing, I started sobbing, you know, very emotional ending. And usually when the end credits come in, music starts blasting. That's usually how most movies end, but at the end, the fact that it was silent and, you know, we just kind of hear the window wipers going back and forth, it just, something about silence is so jarring. And I cried the whole way home, honestly. That movie like really got to me. It was really funny. I just think that ending was like, whoa. It's a realistic sad ending, which I really love, and I feel like I've mainly only seen it in foreign films, which is like why I love foreign films so much. Is like, oh, they're not afraid to like, you know, I feel like American movies, they always want to wrap it up in a nice bow and have it be happy and all this stuff. And it's like foreign films are just so unapologetically realistic, because I think happy endings oftentimes don't happen in real life. And I just personally really enjoyed it. But that's it for this deep dive. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about Pretty Woman. Does it hold up for you? Also, if you've seen Anora, what were your thoughts? Did you gag over it the way I did? Don't forget to subscribe. Also, I have other 90s rom-com deep dives, so go check those out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!